Programming. So next up is Tanya Rivers, and then after that, Tanya will introduce our next speaker. And if you're a student, you're here for extra credit, make sure to sign up on the sign-in sheet, and then also, if you want to spin the wheel, we'll be raffling $100 off tonight and $200 on Thursday. Tanya, Savia, just take it out.
All right, great. So my main function is definitely to introduce the speaker, but before we get there, I wanted to take a little bit of time to just talk about women in computer science. Because our speaker, I don't know if you realize this, is from Google. And so it seems fitting to talk about computer science. So let's start with a little bit of history, okay? And what I'd like to say about history of computer science is that when you are talking about the history of computer science, you're talking about her story. Because a lot of the innovative early contributors to computer programming specifically were women. Let's start at the beginning with Ada Lovelace, who's on our wheel. Did anybody get that one right?
Sabrina did, yeah.
Yay, Sabrina! So Sabrina knows, and now we're all going to know, that not only did Ada Lovelace, who was a mathematician by training, not only did she write the first computer program in about the 1840s, but she also carried with her this mindset of poetical science. I should use quotes, that's not my term. Which led her to ask very forward-thinking questions about an individual's and a society's relationship to technology and how an individual or society uses technology to collaborate to problem solve. So that was something I found very interesting about Ada. In the mid-1800s, she was having those conversations. Our next group of women that I chose to feature are the Eniac Programmers. So Eniac is the first fully electronic general purpose computer. So this computer came to be in the World War II era in the 1940s. And it was built, like the hardware was built by some gentlemen, but the thing was programmed by 6 women. And what's really interesting is that these 6 women were part of a crew of 100 or so women that were hired by the US military to actually be the computers. They were hired, that was their job title, computer. And so what they did is they worked through very complicated differential equations that they were like predicting the trajectory of projectiles. And these 6 were picked out of that group of 100 to do this programming so that then the computer could take over that crunching. So they created the first sort routine, the first software app, and they became the first teachers of modern programming and really paved the way to what we know as computer science today. So this is the Eniac 6. And then the final person I want to feature as a part of our history of computer science is the grandmother of programming. This is Grace Murray Hopper. She was one of the first women ever to earn a PhD in math. She did so in the 30s from Yale. She took a tenured position teaching math at Vassar College, but then when World War II broke out, she decided that she wanted to serve her country in the military, so she joined the Naval Reserve. And in the Navy is where she learned how to program. In 1949, she left the Navy to pursue employment in private industry, and by 1952, she was part of a team that developed and implemented the first compiler. So this is a big deal, because prior to compiling, code was written in binary, and prior to that, it was mechanical. right? Like plugs and wires and cards and all that kind of stuff. So what she did, her team, was enable programming, computer programs to be written in words. And then those words to be translated by the compiler to computer language, and then the programs to run. So this changed everything, right? She retired finally in 1986. So it would be interesting to think about what else was happening in 1986. So this is kind of getting us up to our lifetimes, right? So somehow, from the time when these extraordinary women were making huge contributions to the field to about the mid-80s, women were pursuing careers in computer science and computer programming. But then in the mid-80s, somehow we get this message that computers are for boys. And it's really interesting. You can see that happen in this graph right here. So let me see if I can point it to you. The red line is computer science majors. And what we're looking at is the percent of those majors that are held by women, right? Percent of those degrees held by women. So you can see that with the medical school, with law school, with physical sciences, other things continue this upward trend. Women kept studying those things. But right here, this is about 1984, computer science takes a nosedive for women for some reason, right? And there are lots of theories about why that is. One of the theories, which I investigated just a little bit because I thought it was interesting, was right around that same time, the personal computer became available. People started buying computers to put in their homes, right? And so computer companies started marketing heavily these devices, right? And these were the marketing tools that they were using, right? So this one in particular, right here, right, doesn't necessarily say I'm a woman and I'm capable or interested in computing. She's washing the dishes, right? And I don't think anybody was being malicious, and I don't think it was just what people thought marketing computers should look like, right? So then we get this impression that computers are for boys and then for men. And in fact, computers, when they did end up in the homes, were mostly used by the boys and men in the homes. And there's some research that's gone into, how much time did women spend on computers versus men spending on computers. And men definitely spent more time on computers in the home than women did during this time.
They were doing the dishes.
Because the men were doing the dishes. So that was interesting to me. However, it's not always going to be like that. It doesn't always have to be like that, right? We know these things now. And we know now that computers are for us, all of us, right? And programming is for all of us. The issue now that we have to address is how do we play catch up, right? How do we support women and girls so that they can have the opportunities in computing and in programming? And this is happening at very prestigious colleges right now. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Harvard or Carnegie Mellon, but these are two prestigious STEM universities. And you can see here, what I wanted to point out is, in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, only about 10 or fewer than 10% of the computer science graduates at Harvey Mudd were women. Today, it's almost 50%. So Harvey Mudd did something, right? This isn't an accident. And one thing they did is they hired this woman right here. And she is a computer scientist, and she is the president of their university. And so she made some pretty big changes. She said that most people like problem solving. I mean, people like to do puzzles, people that like to do Sudoku, people like to do crossword puzzles, right? Most people like to do problem solving. So she decided that they would take their first semester computing classes, and instead of calling them Intro to Computer Science, they would call them something like a novel approach to problem solving, or something like that. So they changed the names of these classes and they changed the pedagogy. They said we're going to teach these classes, these beginning programming classes, from a problem-solving approach. They give the students multiple problems to solve and let them decide which problems they want to work on. They also realized that, since the 80s, home computers are marketed towards boys. So the males are coming into their college with a lot more computing experience than the females. When the males and females get in a classroom together, the males tend to dominate the conversation only because they have experience, right? So what they've done is said, okay, we're going to take the folks that have a lot of experience and put them in a different class. And then we're going to take the folks that have some experience and put them in one class. And then we're going to have a class for never-evers. And so if you've never had any computing experience but you're interested, you can feel safe in this class. And so those are some of the things that they've done. So it's this whole idea, this whole meet you where you are idea, right? Which is something that Western prides itself on. So we have a math minor here, we have a math major here. You can see that many of the women who made significant contributions to the field of computer programming actually were mathematicians. So math is very important. It teaches you a very important set of skills. We also have a computer science minor that is focused on writing apps in the Android environment. Once you do that, right, once you get through your program of study, you're going to be employable. And that's where our speaker comes in. Rafaela works as an HR business partner for Google, and on her LinkedIn page, it says YouTube, so I put that on here too. And so she's gonna now talk, what's that? It is owned by Google. And she's been working for Google for a while, right? She has a background actually in psychology. She has a BA in psychology and a master's in science in industrial and organizational psychology. So that's her background. But she I hope, will talk to us about computing at Google and being hired, perhaps. So, without further ado, Lydia's going to call her up.
We're having issues with the internet. 1 second. All right, so without further ado, as you can see, Rafaela is on the lower corner there, and then she'll be the big screen. She's going to have a deck of things to talk to us about. So without further ado, Rafaela, take it away.
Hi everyone, very nice to meet you. An honor to be here, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make it there in person, but luckily there is technology such as the one that my company produces to have me be there, at least virtually. So really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about Google and its culture and what makes the company unique. So let me just start presenting. 1 second, please. Alrighty. So just to formally introduce myself and let you all know what I do here at Google. I've been at Google now for 7 years. I've always worked in the people operations department. which is what we call our human resources department. And for 6 of those years, I was based in headquarters in Mountain View. And recently, in April of last year, I joined YouTube, which many people don't know is actually a part of Google. It's one of the areas, but they do a very good job of branding it very separately from Google, so that's why a lot of people don't know. So the role that I've been doing for, let's say, the last 5 years within people operations, I'm an HR business partner. And what essentially it is I do is that I partner with the senior most leaders, engineering leaders specifically, to help build their organizations, build out their people strategy, think about their diversity strategy, staffing, performance management, compensation. How do we not only, Google's great at attracting just all great talent, but also how do we retain talent? How do we keep people happy, motivated, excited to work at Google? Those are some of the key things that I've been working here for the last 5 years. So a little bit of history on Google. Google was founded in 1998. So here's a photo of the 2 founders, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, in a now famous garage in Menlo Park, California, which is about, let's say, an hour away from where I am in San Bruno. And from the Stanford campus to this Menlo Park garage, all the way to what we call the Googleplex, which is the Google headquarters in Mountain View. Larry and Sergey have been leading us all the way through, so it's a very much a founder-led company. And as they have since the beginning, Larry and Sergey still lead our weekly company-wide meeting, where we basically are able to ask any questions we want to them, and they'll be there to respond and give their perspective and their take to us. So it's very much, they're definitely ingrained in the culture of Google. So today, 19 years after our founding, we have about 70,000 employees in offices in over 150 cities across the world, spanning about 60 countries. And in the last year, believe it or not, we hired 10,000 new Googlers. So it's just enormous. All of our systems, of course, are geared to support growth, and people operations is sort of at like the heart of this in terms of staffing, retaining, and just all the other, compensation and payroll and benefits and all the other things that people operations does to sustain the company. When we started, we only had one product, and I think all of you all know search, Google Search. Today we have dozens of products, and 7 of them have over 1 billion users each, which includes Search, Android, YouTube, Chrome, Maps, Play, and Gmail. If I were there, I would ask people to raise their hands to see, which products you all use. And this is in the context in which everything we do, from hiring thousands of new Googlers every year, to processing hundreds of thousands of vacation days, to renewing millions of resumes. People operations is definitely part of the growth of Google. So we're still in our early days, or at least we like to think that we're still in our early days. But of course, we're facing challenges every day as we grow and mature. So how do we do this internally? Beyond HR, all of this is possible because of internal operating principles that are mission, transparency, and voice. So these 3 things are key tenets of our culture, and they're the pieces we've been most consciously scaling as we've grown. So let me start with mission. We believe that any strong organization needs a strong, clear, and relevant mission. So many organizations have bland or nondescript missions, let's say realizing shareholder value, and that alone doesn't seem like a statement that's specific enough or grand enough to get any employee excited. Something that I tell my friends and family when they ask me, how is it like working at Google? I always tell them, one of the things that I've loved about working here is that we really care about doing good in the world. One of our company philosophies is do no evil. And I really, based on the behaviors that I see every day and people and how they make decisions and how they interact with one another, I truly believe Google holds that close to its core mission. So the official Google mission is to organize all the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And Google is a place where every single employee knows that mission. So we believe that this mission matters to the world, which is why we build technology that helps people live happier and more meaningful lives. Products that are changing the way people access information, do business, learn, and connect with one another. So Googlers want to use technology to make the world better, more efficient, more effective, They want to do the right thing for users, which is what I was mentioning earlier, not just make money at any cost. So moving on, transparency. We're a super transparent company. We default to sharing as much internally as possible, be it about upcoming product launches, internal surveys, or company-wide objectives. In an increasingly complex information economy, the sharing of information is critical to help all of us employees understand the context of the work that we do and how we make decisions. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have a weekly company meeting, seriously, every single week, where our founders come and we talk about, company-wide topics that are top of mind. It's a forum for Googlers to give feedback, and they really do respond to any question that the Googlers have. Google Guys. So Google Guys is the employee survey. It's a company-wide employee survey, and we share results internally. So we can see for every group and every team at Google how happy, productive, or troubled any individual organization is. And then lastly, we use objectives and key results, which we abbreviate OKRs, as our goal-setting mechanism. And these OKRs are designed to be stretch goals, right? So every quarter, every senior vice president needs to get up in front of the entire company, talk about what OKRs they plan to tackle that quarter, and importantly explain why they've achieved some in the past, but have also failed in others. So again, this goes back to the tenet of transparency. And then lastly, voice. So if you let everyone see everything, you've got to let them provide feedback. This is a huge feedback culture. We have lots of formal and informal ways that Googlers can submit feedback on everything from upcoming products to cafe menus, believe it or not. I think all of you have heard of the food that Google offers. And in order to give a couple more examples of feedback, we use, for every major meeting, there's this system that we use called Moderator, where people are allowed to submit questions, and then people can upvote or downvote questions based on whether they think it's important to address or not. Also, we have Google Groups, which are just basically discussion boards for every topic under the sun. It includes a group for managers, a group for yoglers, which is what we call people who like yoga at Google. So there's just a lot of mechanisms to express one's opinions and feedback at the company. So getting these three things right sets the foundation for our company culture. And whatever company values are, they're stronger, of course, when you give employees a sense of ownership over the mission and culture. I'll touch on one output that we value here at Google, and that's innovation. So what's innovation? What do we mean as a company, and how can we as an organization influence, foster, and guide it? It's important to understand what we mean by innovation. It's different from just creativity or generating ideas, no matter how interesting those ideas can be. The idea is going to be useful, right? So useful, even the word useful is in our mission statement. So essentially, it's the ability to take something from the idea stage to making it into a reality, getting it into people's hands. One example of that is Google Translate. Today, Google Translate can translate English with 93% accuracy, which is unbelievable, and can translate across 112 languages. And of course, all of this is free and accessible to everyone. So how do we foster innovation here at Google? So there are 5 qualities we see as foundational. A shared vision, so a shared vision that sets a common purpose and language. It makes it okay for people to invest and take risks because they see how their efforts contribute to the greater mission, even if an idea threatens an old way of doing something. Ownership, so give people freedom to set goals and make their own decisions. It's about giving employees the license to take risks responsibly. So one example of that you might have read or heard is that we give employees 20% time to work on a passion project. So let's say there's a software engineer who's passionate about meditation and yoga, as an example. I'm using that example because I'm passionate about meditation and yoga. But let's say there's an engineer, and I know plenty of them who are. They want to spend 20% of their time building an application that helps people be more mindful during their day. That's something that they can pursue. Gmail, believe it or not, came out of this 20% passion project time that we give engineers and employees. Moving on, curiosity, of course. This is about tapping into a person's intrinsic motivation. How can you make the work challenging and motivating? And we really look for people who can thrive in ambiguity, because innovation is a messy business. It's not easy. The fourth thing is risk-taking. So innovation isn't only about coming up with big ideas, but it's also about testing ideas and putting them into action. This is where things can go wrong and ideas may fail, but that should be okay. So we create a culture and internal systems that allow for people to tolerate failure. We even celebrate failure sometimes, believe it or not. And then lastly, collaboration, connections. This is more than just working together, really. It also represents the ability to quickly access the people, resources, or information one needs to get the idea moving, right? So a quick example on that, we have a program called Dog Food, where basically before any product is launched publicly, we open it up to internal Googlers and allow them to test the product before it goes live, so they can provide feedback, catch bugs, and even like provide information, just very valuable user data for the team that's launching this product. So, as I talk about all these things, really, I think the key thing that makes Google and YouTube, I think YouTube now often, because we do distinguish ourselves a little bit. We call ourselves YouTubers and not Googlers. But the key thing that really distinguishes everything of our culture is the people. So that's, I would say, where the real secret is, and it's what keeps me motivated every day in terms of coming to work. And it's also where people operations come in, right? So we cannot set the culture, but we have a strong influence over it with the people we bring into the organization and the structures that we put into place. So what we can do is to find the amazing individuals, that's what staffing does, who make up Google, to care for and help these people learn and grow as individuals and as leaders, which is what I'm focused on a lot in my HR business partner role, and to make it easy for people to just do the jobs they were hired for. All right, so what sets people operations apart, really quickly, I'll just touch on this, is data. So we have a very data-driven approach. Whichever situation we're confronted with, we always ask ourselves, what's the question we're asking for? Are you guys hearing an echo?
Yes.
A little bit.
Could be our
Did
technology
it
though.
start, or have you heard the echo throughout?
Just keep going, because I think it's our technology. It's okay.
Okay. All right, I'm so sorry about that. I hope it goes away. So the questions, when we're confronted with a problem, what's the question we're asking or problem we're trying to solve? What data are we using to assess the problem? And what data will we use to determine if our efforts were successful? We always want to have those success metrics in place, just to really see if we actually did what we intended to do. We use this approach for decisions that touch every stage of the employee life cycle, from their first conversation with a recruiter, to meeting with their team, to becoming a manager themselves. Really, data makes our jobs, all Googlers, easier, and it helps build a level of trust within the organization. So a little bit about hiring. I know there's some interest in, well, how does Google hire people? So this is an approach we've brought to all of our people processes, starting with hiring. When it comes to people processes, hiring is one of the most important things we do, really. And Google's been infamous for its long and tough interview process. But we did this to make sure everyone we hired is right for Google. I remember when I interviewed for my job, they asked me plenty of brain teaser questions that you kind of, would ask, how is that relevant to my job in HR? I don't think it is. But we did away with those brain teaser questions. I'll talk a little bit about that coming up. But basically, we received I think last year we received 2.5 million job applications. And as I mentioned earlier, we hired 10,000 of these people to be new Googlers. So it all starts with a resume review. We try to compare resumes to a predetermined list of minimum qualifications, which varies for every role. And these qualifications are determined by the hiring manager. It's important to remember that to assess resumes against those qualifications is one of the key things that we really do, as opposed to comparing resumes to one another. So we really try to hold the bar high. Then we will move on to an on-site interview, phone screens first. If your resume looks good, seems like there's gonna be a match, we have a phone call, the candidate will have a phone call with a recruiter, and just get a verbal check-in to see like whether the role is a good match for the person, understand whether the skills are a good match for the role, etc. For the on-site interviews, we use structured interviews. So basically, as I mentioned, we did away with these brain teaser questions that weren't really related to the role, and we really use structured interviews so that we can assess the skills that are needed for the role that this person is interviewing for. Lastly, you would think that after those interviews we're done, but not quite. Candidates have to go through a hiring committee. So once the interviews are done, a hiring manager can either reject anyone they want, but if they want to make a hire, and the lights just went out, let me turn these off. There we go. So once the hiring manager says, yep, I want to hire this person, they actually have to pass the candidate on to an impartial hiring committee, which will review the application, the references, the interview notes, and this happens on a weekly basis. The point of this committee is really to remove the hiring ability from any individual manager who might be getting desperate to fill a role, and really to ensure that we're holding a consistent bar across all candidates. All right, and the 4 things that we look for in all candidates, no matter what the role is we assess folks on general cognitive ability. So no brain teasers, we don't do it that way. Questions that usually are asked during interviews are intentionally vague or lack full context, just to see how, we really want to get to see how the candidate is thinking through problems, and also thinking about what information, what questions are they asking to get the information they need to solve this question or this answer. Another thing that's new is that we don't ask a GPA for people who've been out of school for more than 3+ years. So that's been different. We want to, give people a fair shot at interviewing for the role, and sometimes a GPA doesn't say everything about the person's general cognitive ability. Role-related knowledge, I would say second most important to general cognitive ability, and that's basically asking, do you have the basic skills to do the job? So while definitely important for the technical roles, this is not the most important. As I mentioned, it's GCA, it's general cognitive ability, but it's definitely important. Then it's leadership, so really how do you take proactive action to get things done? Are you a team player? Do you rally others along towards a cause? So we really want to see those characteristics in the candidates that we see. And then lastly, Googliness. I don't know if any of you have heard of this term. It's not a real word. It's something we invented. And it's really about whether this person is going to fit within the Google culture. So we look for, are they comfortable with ambiguity? We have to solve a lot of ambiguous problems every day. Do they have a passion for the mission? Are they humble? Or do they demonstrate ownership about an issue or a problem? And are they collaborative in nature? So these are some of the things that we look at when assessing Googliness. And this is part of like the structured interviewing process I was talking about earlier. And then managers, so I just want to say management is a huge part of the Google experience. We want to build managers who care deeply about the individuals, who have the skills, who have the empathy. And we actually did research on this, on what makes a good manager. I think it might have been, I'm guessing right now, like 7 to 8 years ago, on what makes a good manager. And we published an article in the New York Times. If you're interested in reading about it, it's called Project Oxygen. So it's interesting to find, what we found was a good manager. Like, do they share relevant information? Have they had a career conversation with the employee? I mean, that's just like 2 of the, I think, 8 factors that we identified. So definitely something that's interesting to look up if you're interested more in this topic. And then we also did research on what makes teams effective. So what we found was that it's the how that matters more than who. So we would think that like putting together a group of like 10 rock stars would make a perfect team. Well, that's not the case. What happens is that teams are differentiated really on effectiveness because of how team members interact with each other, and much less by who is on the team. And psychological safety, they found, was the most important and foundational of the 5 dynamics that characterized effective teams. And by psychological safety, this is around like, do I feel safe to voice my opinions even though they're the contrary opinion? Do I feel safe to ask a question that might be perceived as quote unquote stupid? Can I be myself? Can I show up as myself, as the yogi meditation lover, or whoever you are, right? So being part and feeling safe within the group was a key thing that they found was demonstrated effective teams here at Google. And this framework actually held up for all types of teams at Google: sales, engineering, people ops, from San Francisco to Singapore. So we also tested these cultural factors as well. All right, and then performance management. Of course, performance management is a key piece in making sure that we're assessing and rewarding performance in a fair, valid, and efficient manner, and providing, this is the key, meaningful feedback and development for all Googlers. So this is the rating scale that we use to rate Googlers on their performance every 6 months. We think, again, that openness and transparency are super important. Managers are important, especially in guiding the career development of individuals. And I think that's all I want to say on that. I don't want to harp too much on that. And then another thing is just like our compensation philosophy. So Google has a pay for performance philosophy, in that salary increases, equity, and bonuses are tied directly to performance over time. And when we say pay for performance, we really do believe in paying unevenly, in that we pay based on impact, which doesn't always follow distribution. So you think about your favorite sports team. LeBron James is used as an example here. Typically the star player, such as LeBron, has significantly higher impact than others, and therefore is paid more. The same applies to the number of papers published by researchers. Normal distribution would predict that the top researcher would publish about 35 papers, when in reality the number is closer to 460. So their impact is much greater. And that's sort of the philosophy that we have here. The greater your impact, the greater you will get paid. And then of course, I mean, the workplace design and perks. I know many of you might have seen the internship movie, is that what it was called? Where we, they walk through all the perks that Google offers, like on-site services such as haircuts, dry cleaning. To be clear, these things are not free to every Googler, but nor do they cost Google anything. So it's just a way to keep Googlers focused on the work, not have to drive, 15 minutes to go get a haircut. Just a nice convenience. Other things, we let dogs on site. I love dogs. I don't have a dog, but I love dogs, so I like seeing them around the office. And of course, the food is, I think, one of the hugest perks. I seriously thank Google every day for the food that we get, because it never gets old. We have free food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is amazing. And it's also the reason I gained the Google 15, also known as the 15 pounds that I gained since joining Google 7 years ago. All right, I made it to my last slide. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, diversity at Google. It's so key to our culture and who we are. Our goal for diversity is a natural extension of our core mission, really, to increase access to information and opportunity by breaking down barriers through technology. And all these perks we provide don't matter if our workforce really doesn't reflect the users we're trying to build for. So we know that diversity is not just about doing the right thing, although in our hearts, of course, we know that's the right thing, but it also has an impact on our products, our users, our culture. So our end goal here is not just to address underrepresentation, but to leverage the outcome of better representation. Research shows that greater diversity can drive increased performance, earnings, and innovation, and a stronger brand reputation. So those are some of the factors that that show that diversity makes business sense. So we know we're not there yet, and that we still have a lot of work to do. And it's really not just about hitting some quota or some numbers. We want to create lasting systemic cultural change here. So our strategy enhances diversity and inclusion at Google and addresses the external issues that affect our future. So our programs are designed so that leaders, Googlers, and other tech companies are empowered to get involved and really own this as well. This is not just, Larry Page and Sergey Brin dictating us. We have Googlers at every level of the company involved in our diversity efforts. So this is a long-term commitment, as I said. We're not gonna get there immediately. We've been working on this for years and years, but we are focused on four key areas, which I'll just go through briefly. First of all, hire diverse Googlers, right? So in the past, our university-focused hiring programs have relied heavily on a relatively small number of schools, but we know those schools aren't always the most diverse. So in the past few years, we've been more than tripled the number of schools that we've been recruiting from, and now 20% of the hires we make from a university are from these new campuses, okay? Secondly, we want to foster a fair and inclusive culture. I work with my leaders every day on ensuring that this happens. So we want to ensure that we have an environment where every single Googler can thrive. We've raised awareness about unconscious bias. Nearly 3/4 of all Googlers have participated in our unconscious bias training. And we've now rolled out a hands-on workshop that provides the actual practical tips for addressing bias when it happens in the workplace. We're also drawing on the idea of 20% time to enable employees to spend some time working on these efforts. Apparently since 2015, more than 700 Googlers from 90 offices are driving 32 projects as part of Diversity Core, which is a formal program that we have for employees to contribute to these efforts. Thirdly, we want to expand the pool of technologists. So making computer science education accessible and available to everyone is one of our most important initiatives here. We recently announced, for example, Howard West. This is a 3-month engineering residence program for Howard University CS majors to come spend 3 months, work at the Googleplex, see what it's like to be an engineer, what it's like to be surrounded by technology and work at a company such as Google. And that's just one example of the many, many things we're doing to expand the pool of technologists. Lastly, bridging the digital divide. So we're also aware that these technologies and these digital enhancements are more available in some parts of the world and in the country than in others. So we will also want more underrepresented communities, including women and minorities, to share the benefits of the web and to have access to the economic engine it provides. So one example is that we launched the Accelerate with Google Academy, which helps provide business owners get online, grow, and drive economic impact. So overall, our commitment to diversity extends beyond the walls of Google. We're really committed to building products that are accessible and useful to everyone, and also want to make sure we support diversity in our supplier network. When we do so, we empower more people to use and help improve how we develop inclusive products and platforms. I really have seen the difference that all of these efforts combined have had on the workplace. I've been in HR as an HR business partner for the last 5.5 years at Google, and I can tell you we've made tremendous strides. It is a topic of daily discussion for many individuals, and I think that more and more leaders and Googlers themselves are slowly becoming more comfortable with the topic, because let's face it, sometimes diverse topics around diversity can become uncomfortable. People don't know how to navigate. They feel like saying something is going to come off wrong. So we're really trying to equip leaders and Googlers to let's open this discussion. So let's talk about it internally first, and how we can foster this inclusive culture within the workplace, but then also how can we as a company, with the force that we have, with the name that we have, do more good in the world and bring some of these values and these approaches to just beyond our 4 Google walls. All right, so that was a lot. I hope you all kept up with me. And now I'll just open it up for any questions. I know, Lydia, you may have some questions for me, but I just wanted to open it up now. And I'll take this deck off so you can actually see my face a little bit clearer.
Alright, I have one question. It
Yes.
has to do with a little scandal that happened a couple of months ago with a white software engineer male who sent out a memo titled Google's Ideological Chamber, where he claimed that there was sexism in computer science, not because of gender differences, but because women were psychologically different than men. And so I was just wondering, how did Google address this, and why is it important to address it?
Yeah, I think just answering that very simply, first of all, there were lots of opinions from across the spectrum around this memo that went out. But essentially the way that Google saw it was that we have some core company values where we as a company value diversity, we value everyone feeling respected and worthy of being here. So that memo for many, many engineers, and I want to say many female engineers, they felt just completely undermined, and just the sense of feeling perhaps like not attacked, one might say, or unworthy. So for the greater good of Google, we just said, you know what, this is just not what our company stands for. We are all about, people being able to express themselves, but first and foremost, we have these company values that we want to adhere to, and which is why this individual was terminated from the company. And it was, a bold action, but I think it was a necessary one to send a clear message to everyone that this is what we stand for as a company. This is not like in your personal life, you can have the beliefs that you want, you can say what you need to say, but as an employee of Google and within this company, this is the culture that we want to foster and adhere to, period.
Okay, anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? A really cool mic.
Sure. So, thank you so much for being here and talking with us. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. So I'm a professor in the Math and Computer Science department, and we're always interested in helping our students find gainful employment after they are finished here. So I'm wondering if you might be able to give us some advice in training our students to be, a good fit for Google or other places, because I know Google's not the only place that's going to hire our students. But so what are some bits of advice you have for a department in readying their graduates?
Yeah. So I'm a little bit removed from the staffing side. So if I were from staffing, I think I'd have a much more robust answer for you. But I do feel that, there's plenty of very smart engineers in the world, right? But what Google really looks for is, remember those 4 different areas that we talked about? So GCA, right? People who are in computer science and math and taking these courses and succeeding in them are already pretty smart individuals. So how can they differentiate themselves from like the pack? I would say having like a balanced, just, I hate to say the word extracurricular, but like have interests that just are different, that you're passionate about, that you can lead. The leadership piece I think is so important. It's really one of the things that I see distinguish engineers from like the good ones from the great ones. So thinking about what they can do to like make an impact on the world. I mean, these can be simple things. It doesn't have to be like, something major. It can be like locally. What are you doing for your local community, right? What are you doing to make your community better in a simple way? So leadership, for sure, I think is one of the key things that I would push your students a little bit more to think about, besides the curriculum, the CS and the math, besides like working hard to get good grades in that, like what are you passionate about, and can you use that passion to have impact in the world?
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Melissa Markel, and I'm really happy to hear your talk. So, a question about the leadership angle. If everybody at Google is a leader, how is it not complete pandemonium? Do you have some sort of followership as well as leadership requirement, and how do you manage that? And how would a new person navigate that? How can you burst onto the scene as a leader when you are bursting into the Googleplex that is wall-to-wall leaders?
Right. So even within Google, there's a spectrum of leaders, as you can imagine. One thing that's interesting, and it is a challenge, it does pose a challenge to functioning as, like, have a team functioning within these parameters, that it's a very bottoms-up culture. So we have managers who come in and they're like, okay, so team, this is what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna implement this this Scrum process, and this is how we're gonna like manage our projects. And the engineers will be like, no, like we actually, that's not a good way because of X, Y, Z reasons. There's data behind this, we've tried this. And the managers, and my experience, have been just a little bit shocked to see how much sway even like the individual contributors and employees have on these kinds of decisions. So I think one of the ways to distinguish, and I see it all the time, is just the data. Like, we are such a data-driven company. So when like person A and person B have an idea, they both want to take lead on driving a project in the direction that they think it should go, really the person who quote unquote wins is a person who has the most solid and well-researched argument and reasoning for pursuing an idea. So I would say data and just trends and that kind of thing is something that distinguishes the kinds of leaders that we have and which leader actually gets the leadership. And then also just in the nature of the roles, like we hire different levels of people at different levels of seniority. So we'll hire undergrad, people who are straight from undergrad. We'll hire people who've been in the industry for 20 plus years. So just naturally by terms of experience, there's different levels of leadership that they can demonstrate, which just naturally plays out as well. But yes, to your point, I think it's a very local culture, very bottoms up, and one has to be prepared to just come with like the best, well-researched answer to prove one's point.
Hello, thanks for speaking to us tonight. I'm Zach Taylor, I'm a student here at Western. And I was just wondering, as a student, specifically a Latino student from a rural school, what can students like me who come from at least less prestigious educational backgrounds, what can we do to sort of level the playing field between those who have it, or who have, I guess, higher access dollars, labor, like chances.
Yeah. First of all, as I mentioned in my talk, I think Google is putting the onus on themselves, on us, to help bridge that gap, which is one of the things that I mentioned earlier, was that we are reaching out to so many more universities than we did previously. We are no longer doing like, oh, we're only going to Stanford and MIT and that's it. No. And I've seen, the 7 years that I've worked here, I've seen that pool of universities grow and grow and grow. In terms of the outreach that Google does, right? So that's number one. Number two, in terms of what you can do as an individual, I've alluded to some of these things. I know people who've applied to Google and interviewed for, I'm trying to count the interviews like with people. The highest number I've heard is that interviewed 8 different times. So, and they got in at the 8th time, right? So maybe in the first instance they applied and they didn't have the experience that they were, the amount of experience that they were looking for at first for the particular role. But then eventually, like as you grow as you continue in your profession, you gain more experience, you have more to show for, right? But I would say just see what you can do in terms of the leadership aspect. If there's any internships, and I'm not talking like you gotta internet Google. I'm saying like, is there like a local, like even at your university, can you intern at the IT department there and see what you can do there? So getting some hands-on experience where you're showing, number one, I'm interested, I'm motivated, I'm proactive, I'm here to learn, and I thrive in ambiguity. But also just gives you the role-related knowledge to make yourself like more appealing to the staffing screeners.
Any other questions?
Oh, and also, sorry, just one more thought. Highlight your diversity. Like, highlight the fact that, you're part of the Latino group from, the university that you're at. Highlight the fact that you tutor bilingual kids in English, or that you're tutoring Latino kids on programming or something like that, right? So, when you apply to these companies, the Googles and the Facebooks, like make sure that you show like who you are as an individual and also what you're doing to contribute to the community from which you come from.
Hi, my name is Gracia, and I'm a student coordinator at the Center for Gender Equity and Social Justice. And first of all, I want to say that you're a badass Chicona. And I think that runs in the family, you know, with Dr. Bertha as well. A question, what kind of benefits do Google offer to women?
Yeah. A lot. So, aside from the perks, like one of the things that we have here is we have a mother's room. So let me start first. Women get pregnant, of course, and we are very generous in the maternity leave benefits that we give to women. So we want women to be able to take time off, significant time off, to actually spend time with their baby, with their family as they transition into this period. And also we're really focused on the transition back into the workplace. It's taking 6 months off and then coming back to work and like trying to pretend that it's like all dandy and functioning as it was before is not realistic. So there's things like we have a gradual ramp up. So people who come back to work can start 50% time, and then 60, and then 70% time, and then like over the course of a few months, they ramp up to 100%. We have mother's rooms, so women who are nursing, they can actually go in this building where I am right now, go and pump so that they can have milk to feed their children. One thing that I was actually talking with Lydia about, which is a controversial benefit, I would say, is that we give women the option to a fertility option to actually freeze and preserve your eggs in the case that you want to wait to have babies until later, because it's a career decision, right? Like, let's say, I really want to focus on my career for the next 10 years, but I also have this anxiety that in 10 years I won't be able to have children. Well, want to give people the option that if it's the case that you don't want to have children right now, you can postpone that, or it doesn't have to be because you're focusing on your career, right? That's just one of the reasons. But for whatever reason, you want to hold off on having children, you can have that at a later time. And this is like a $70,000 procedure that, people have to pay. So it's definitely like of monetary value. I think it could be controversial in terms of like what it means and what message the company's sending to women. So there's some debate about that. I'm trying to think of what other benefits we have for women specifically. We have flexible working schedules. That's definitely something that, Googlers, men and women, take advantage of. And I'm gonna pause there because I could just try to recall every benefit that we have, but that's gonna be very hard.
All right, any other questions?
And please, they can be like the silly questions like, what do you guys really play volleyball at the middle of the day like we saw in the movie? Yes, they do actually. So, any questions?
Any questions at all? No? All right, well, thank you, Rafaela. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and talking to us, and I'm sorry it didn't work out for you to be here in person, but we're really thankful that you were here to be our speaker for math and computer science. Thank you.
Thank you all. It was such a pleasure to be here.